Welcome to our third video in the series on nutrient requirements for animals, specifically livestock. In this video, we're going to be discussing the role of impact and how that can affect mostly maintenance energy costs in our livestock, but it does have a great impact on their nutrient demands. In fact, climate has the biggest effect on maintenance energy requirements. Mammals are homeotherms. They are designed to maintain a constant body temperature. So when they get hot, they've got to get rid of excessive heat. And when they're cold, they have to generate heat. And so we need to understand that when we're thinking about feeding livestock. There's a lot going on this slide, but we're going to highlight a few things that nutritionists need to be aware of and think about from a feeding perspective. The first is understanding the term thermoneutral zone. All animals have a region of temperature, whether it's from low to high, that there is a lower boundary called the lower critical temperature and an upper boundary, the upper critical temperature. And in that region is what we call the thermoneutral zone. That's where we don't see an impact on metabolic rate. However, if we deviate outside of the thermoneutral zone, then we do see a great impact on metabolic rate. We see metabolic rate increase on both instances. So for example, if we see an animal go into cold stress, where their blood vessels are going to constrict, bring all the blood to the center of the body, we're going to see an increase in metabolic rate as they're probably shivering and going through different things to try to maintain that constant body temperature. They can cross over into hypothermia, and metabolic rate is going to decrease rapidly during that time to the point where it can cause death. And so this is when we're in physiological cold stress. Now, where we're located in Northern California, I can't really think of a time we see cold stress like this. We do see like neonatal lambs that are just born in the winter because they don't have the tools to fight off a little bit of cold, they can go into hypothermia. And so it's making sure we understand that metabolic rate. But on the flip side, we do in Northern California in the valley see heat stress. We see the animals in trying to get rid of that heat, they're going to dilate the blood vessels. They're going to try to get that heat out of their body and evaporate it however they can. And that's going to be whether it's through sweating, panting, however they can get the heat out of their body. But if it goes too far, they will do the same thing. Metabolism will shut down and their metabolic rate will drop rapidly and ultimately can lead to death. And so what we need to do is understand how we can feed our animals. A great example of cold stress is when we're feeding, say, Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, in the feedlots, and a winter storm is coming through. In order to help the feedlot cattle prepare for that winter storm, a lot of times they'll top dress the feed bunks with hay. The reason is hay is slow to ferment. It produces a lot of heat in the fermentation process, and that's actually going to help the cattle produce more heat during that period of a storm that they're able to manage their body temperature better. An example for heat stress is we will a lot of times make sure during the summer all of our sheep have white salt or salt out there, not just a trace mineral block, but actual salt. Because what better to encourage hydration than to have salt available? It's cheap, inexpensive, but that will encourage them to keep them hydrated and drinking water and flushing their body system to try to get that heat that they've got in their body out of it. A lot of times in dairies you see misters to try to help control heat stress. And that is something that we deal with in a very real way in Northern California. But the main goal is understanding that when our animals are in that thermoneutral zone, that's when we see the most efficient metabolic rate. You know how we talked about wanting to keep that metabolic or that maintenance a lower cost of production. If we keep animals in our thermoneutral zone, that's where we're keeping that maintenance nutrient costs low. As soon as we start getting them into either cold or heat stress, that metabolic rate's going up. That's when we're going to see an increase in their maintenance needs, and we're going to become inefficient because more nutrients are going to be going to maintenance, less to production. And so that's just an example and a quick discussion of the importance of a thermoneutral zone and why we need to make sure animals try to stay in that thermoneutral zone, and an understanding that there's a lower critical temperature and an upper critical temperature that defines that zone. The next video will be starting to discuss reproduction and go into breeding, pregnancy, and lactation.